Hey everybody, welcome to Book Club Parent Edition, where we take a book in the Christian literature sphere and we read it and we talk about it and how it can influence your parenting of your students. Today we are going to look at the book Everybody Always by Bob Goff. If you've ever met Bob Goff, he's an interesting figure. I'm Kyle, I'm joined by Dakota today. Dakota and I have both read this book, and I think we've got a lot of things to say about it, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so like I said, Bob Goff is kind of an interesting guy. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Bob Goff, Dakota, why don't you give them an idea of what Bob is like?
Yeah, so, I mean, you've read both of his books.
Right.
The first one being Love Does, this one being Everybody Always. This guy is eccentric, to say the least.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's a really good way of putting it.
To give you a good picture, I've seen him speak live 5 or 6 times now.
Right, yeah.
And he comes out on the stage yelling and like...
But not in a bad way.
In such an exciting way. The best way I can describe it is if you see a kid going to the circus or the fair and they have their balloons, and the excitement that they have just about being there, and then they see an elephant or a clown or something, that is what you can expect from Bob Goff.
But he's the adult version of that.
Correct.
Yeah.
The adult version who is also a lawyer and an ambassador for another country.
Yeah, how do you mix those together? You put a kid with balloons riding an elephant in an adult body, and it happens to be a lawyer and an ambassador from the country of Uganda. But he's white. He's from the United States,
Yeah.
okay?
And he's a professor at one of the most prestigious law schools in the country.
Right. So, I mean, they don't make many people like Bob Goff.
Correct. I agree with that 100%.
All right. So in both this book and in his previous book, Love Does, Bob uses stories to teach some facet of love to the reader, or some other related principle. What were some of your favorite stories and lessons from this book in particular?
Yeah, so I prefer to listen to books. So this is actually my second time listening through this book, and Bob Goff actually reads it. So.
Which, if you've ever heard Bob in person, you know it has to be a treat to listen to him read his own book.
Yes, so I would recommend if you do get this book, if you do purchase it, also get the audiobook and listen to him while you read along, because it's a joy to listen to him read this. But there's 2 specific stories that, of the whole, there's many, but 2 that I think are most applicable to why we're doing this for parents. The first one is the story of Carol. In chapters 2 and 3. That one
made me cry so hard.
I cried both times that I read this book, or listened to it rather. And what this story is it's basically Bob Goff goes through how he's bought and sold all these houses at random, it seems like, and he finally decides...
Which is something that Bob Goff would do.
Absolutely. And he finally decides, hey, it's time to buy another house, and the house across the street from where him and his wife and family were living comes for sale. So he's like, let's just go and buy that one. So they go in and they go over and buy the house, and then they decide, okay, we're going to sell our house. But he says a very incredible statement. He's like, we weren't looking to sell our house. We were looking to get a neighbor.
Yeah.
Because they realize that your neighbors are the people that you are invested in and in relation with. And he talks about how Jesus tells us to love our neighbors and all of that. But they end up with the neighbor who is Carol. And Carol becomes much more than a neighbor to them. Carol becomes a grandmother to his children.
Yeah.
Carol becomes a mother figure to him and his wife. Carol becomes one of their deepest and closest friends. And Carol ends up going through a very long battle with cancer. And one of the things that they talk about is they do this incredible parade in their town, or on their street.
Which is, again, something that Bob Goff would do.
Yeah, and when she couldn't participate, and she couldn't see the parade from where she could be sitting in her home because she was essentially on hospice, had already come in, and they just sent her home to be comfortable. They redirected the entire parade of 500 or 600 people to walk through her yard in front of her window.
Yeah.
And wave to her and see her, and she died shortly after that.
Yeah.
But the impact here is that Bob Goff loved someone in an incredible way and did it in an incredible way. Did something that seems crazy, buying a house and then interviewing people to buy your old house. It wasn't just who had the most money. He doesn't actually say how much he sold it for, but it wouldn't shock me if he sold it for far less and didn't make any money.
He did neighbor interviews, like, who do I want to be my neighbor?
Yes. But I just think about, for me, my son is 8 months old. I think about what would it look like for my son to grow up watching me care for and love people the way Bob Goff did.
Yeah.
And Bob Goff is only doing that because he's seen the way Jesus loved people in the Bible.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, the whole point of this book, Everybody Always, is that, you know, the tagline says it all, becoming love in a world full of setbacks and difficult people. We look at an example of that kind of love and we think, wow, that's eccentric, that's abnormal. But then we ask ourselves, well, should it be abnormal for a Christian to have that kind of love? You know, ultimately, the thing that made me cry at the end of the story was not the fact that Carol lost her life. The thing that made me cry is the level to which Bob Goff and his family loved her.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like you said, what would it look like to teach our children, to teach our families to love other people the way Bob Goff loved Carol? And it starts really with us giving that example.
Well, and to that point, I told you I was going to talk about my father-in-law a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that my father-in-law is one of the greatest men of God that I know.
Yeah.
And the reason is because he lives this way. We look at these stories, and it can be very easy for us to go, wow, I can see why this is practical, but it's impractical what he's doing. Well, it's practical for Bob Goff because he's a lawyer and an ambassador, and he probably has plenty of resources to do all these crazy things that he's doing.
Right.
But for the everyday person, it's like, well, how do we do those things? How do we, how do we spend $30 in a day taking phone calls from a prison? You know,
we may not have the luxury of buying the home across the street and selling our home and interviewing our neighbors, but we can have the opportunity to do something. Love doesn't always have to have a price tag. Right,
and if I can share one story that is personal, that from my father-in-law and my in-laws' whole family, what they've done is, I can't remember how many years ago, it was several years ago, at my father-in-law's work, he works at a nursing home facility, one of his coworkers said, hey, I know that you're a Christian, and my cousin she's going to die. She's in hospice. Will you just go and visit her and pray for her? And, you know, in that moment, that's that weird moment where it's like, I don't know this person. But David, my father-in-law, said, yeah, absolutely. And here's what happened as a result of that. It's an ongoing thing still today. He went and met this person and ended up meeting her son, who was, I think, 16 at the time, who is... grew up in a really difficult circumstance. He's a young black guy, and he is still in difficult circumstances. But what ended up happening is she ended up dying. I'm not sure exactly how long later, but David didn't stop going and visiting her all the way to the very end. He built this relationship with Trey, her son. Still has that relationship with Trey today.
Wow.
And is actually a father figure to Trey. He's still, you know, in the same culture, doing a lot of the same rough things. He has 2 children, and my father-in-law's name to those 2 children is Papa.
Wow.
And he shared the gospel many times. He has went to Trey on nights where he thought that it was all over. He's been with him through stabbings and shootings, prison. They have consistently been with them. And some people would say, that's crazy. That's unsafe. And I would dare to say that my father-in-law and my mother-in-law would say, we love them.
Right.
And so when we think that what Bob Goff is doing is impractical, you need to figure out what is practical for you. What do you want your kids to see you living out? Do you want them to see you living out a timid faith that is afraid to step out and do something that may seem crazy? Or do you want to live a real faith that is unhinged at times and seemingly impractical?
Yeah, I think at the end of my life, I think I would rather someone look at me and say that I was eccentric in the way that I loved others rather than saying I was too busy to love others.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's good. What other chapters or stories or principles did you find meaningful from the book?
So the other big story that I think that really applies to parenting specifically is the story of Bob Goff and his son in the plane. Yeah. This is nuts. Like, I just can't even understand this. So he owns this plane. It's called a Beaver. Or no, he doesn't own it. He rents it, I think.
Did he rent it or I don't know if he bought it or not.
But the point is they have this place that they go to up in Canada or Alaska.
I think it's Canada.
Yeah, they have a home up there, and they fly up there, and this plane is one that lands on water and all that. And his son, his senior year of high school, gets his pilot's license and all of this, and they go on this trip, and this is a super dangerous, they got to fly through a canyon and then land on a very small lake that doesn't have a lot of distance.
Right, yeah.
So the first time through, Bob flies in, lands. It's pretty scary. And I'm sure that his son was nervous. He was even nervous.
I think his son was 18 at the time, but he already had his pilot's license.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so they go in, they land, and Bob's like, "Okay, I'm getting in the back seat, and you're gonna fly us out of here." And I'm like, "What?" The principle here, and the son ends up flying us out, and then Bob says, "Turn around and go and land. Do the even harder thing, which is to fly through this canyon and land on this small lake, which if you don't go fast enough when you take off, you crash. If you don't go, if you're going too fast, you crash."
Right, yeah.
So
you got to hit it just right.
Very small margins for error, except he was with his son, and he gave his son what his son needed to accomplish what was a very difficult thing, which was trust. Mm. And I think about how that applies to parents today, and even myself as my son is getting older. How will I trust him to do things that I may not think that he's fully capable of doing yet? Will I trust him enough to try?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that I'm going to trust him enough to put both of our lives at risk in a
Sure,
plane.
yeah.
However, his son did have all the certifications and all of those things. At what point will you trust that they can do what they've learned to do? At what point, as parents who disciple their children, will we trust them to live the faith that we've been teaching them?
Right. I think that's such an incredibly valuable lesson because we are preparing to launch our students into the world.
Yeah.
And I would never send my kid out on to go ride in the Tour de France without ever first teaching them how to ride a bike. I've got to give him an opportunity to fall while riding the bike before he's ready to live his life on his own without the training wheels. And so we as parents, we've got to figure out ways of helping our students prepare for those opportunities. And that means that we're going to have to trust the parenting that we've instilled in them. But we've got to trust our kids enough to give them opportunities. Mm-hmm. If we never give our kids opportunities before they enter into the world, they won't be prepared to live the kind of faith in the world that the Lord wants them to live. I think just yesterday, my daughter, oh man, she took a massive tumble on her bike. The thing I love about her is she'll take a tumble and she'll get right back up and get back on. But if I was too scared as a parent, I could have said, never mind, not going to do that anymore. Yeah. You got hurt. I want to protect you. I want to keep you safe. But sometimes our role as parents is not protecting and keeping our kids safe. It's preparing them for the kind of battles that they are going to wage on behalf of the Lord in the world. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So Bob is I mean, it's really hard not to open up this book and highlight just about everything that you read.
Right.
Because he's really good at crafting memorable statements.
Mm-hmm.
Give me just a few of your favorite memorable statements and why they were so memorable for you.
Yeah, so with that being said, you know, one of the best things about this book is that every chapter gives you the memorable statement on the front end. So if you are like, I need to find it, or, I mean, there's plenty of other ones, but he gives you that
right.
quotable thing right at the beginning and says, this is what this chapter is about, which is a really helpful thing in reading the book. But some of the things that I really wrote down that resonated with me with one thing was, it doesn't matter what our faith looks like, it matters what it is.
Yeah.
Because in our culture of social media, in our culture of making sure that everything is polished and
everything's all about image.
Yeah. That doesn't really matter, because I can go out of here and on Facebook and from the outside perspective look like I'm a super Christian and look like I'm really close to God. But in reality, what my faith may be is broken, shambles, needing help, needing guidance. There's things happening behind closed doors that no one knows about. All of these things, which really emphasizes the whole point of this book, is when you engage in loving other people and being loved by people, those things are seen.
Yeah.
Those hard things are seen. And when those things are seen, your true faith is seen.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter what our faith looks like. It matters what it actually is.
Yeah. It's what we might call Instagram Christianity versus real Christianity.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, people may see the highlight reel of you taking that selfie with the kids from the third world country that you worked with on the mission trip. Mm-hmm. The question I would have is, what are you doing day in and day out? Not just what are you doing on the mission trip.
Yeah.
You know, to love on people, to embody love, to actually put substance to your faith. Mm-hmm. And that stuff may not be Instagrammed, but that stuff is what is real.
And it's okay for people to not know about what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the things in this book and In Love does is not everything that Bob Goff does.
No, not at all.
They're probably just the really big things that, let's be honest, will sell books, but are also very helpful.
Yeah.
But this guy talks about, he carries a bucket around every day. Why does he carry a bucket around? To remind himself that he needs to fill himself with patience.
Yes.
Like,
which is something that Bob Goff would do.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for crying out loud, 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient. He's reminding himself, I need to be loving, specifically in patience.
Absolutely. And what is that, again, what does that say to your children as they witness you living a real faith, not an Instagram faith?
Right. Exactly.
I like that statement.
That was good. That was good. What are some other memorable statements from the book that really kind of resonated with you?
This is probably, there's two more that I'm going to give you. This first one is a really big one. Our problem following Jesus is we're trying to be a better version of us rather than a more accurate reflection of him.
That is such a strong statement.
Yeah, because even with Bob Goff, when he's telling these stories, he is always saying, the only reason that I am living my life this way is because of Jesus, and that's the way Jesus lived his life.
Right.
And he was saying we so often kind of get stuck in this legalistic mindset that we have to look a certain way, we have to do certain things, we have to dress a certain way, we have to act in the proper ways. And what happens is when we do that, we're trying to modify our behavior and look better for ourselves rather than for Jesus. When all we really need to be doing is making it to where when we look in the mirror, we see Jesus more than we see us.
Yeah.
Because we're broken.
Yeah.
It just floored me.
That's really good. And honestly, it's a higher calling.
Yeah.
You know, we hear sometimes people say all you really need to do is to strive to be the best version of you. Well, no, we're called to be Christians. That means little Christ. When people see us, we want them to see Jesus. In order for them to see Jesus, we need to let the Holy Spirit work within us to become more accurate depictions of Jesus.
Right.
And that starts with the way that we love God and the way that we love other people.
Well, and the best version of us and the best that we can bring is still filthy rags in the end.
Yeah.
So why try and be the best of us?
Absolutely.
Versus being more like Jesus.
Absolutely. All right. What's that last one?
The last one is when he's talking about friendships. He tells a story about this guy that he meets because he flies, to all kinds of places all the time. And it's this guy that he continually sees as a TSA worker when he's going through the line. It says, friendships can last a lifetime.
This one, by the way, hold on real quick. This chapter got me. This chapter, I'm pretty certain I cried at the end of this chapter too. But anyway, go ahead. Start over from the beginning.
So friendships can last a lifetime, but we make them 3 minutes at a time.
Yep. I highlighted that one. That was one of my big takeaways from the book.
It's this thing of, do you have time to love people?
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot of time, but it can have a forever impact. And again, I go back to even thinking about my father-in-law again. Sure, he could have said, man, I really need to go home today, or I don't really have time to go and, spend time often at this nursing home seeing this person. I don't have time for that. Bob Goff could have just went through the line like most of us do so that they can get on the plane, but instead he chose to talk to this man. And you know what ends up happening is he ends up inviting this guy to his Christmases and spending time with his family.
Isn't that wild? It's like a TSA checkpoint agent
Yeah.
became just really good friends with him because he decided to love him 3 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
That's just, we think sometimes that this task is too big for us, but it's not that it's too big for us. It's that sometimes we get so overwhelmed by the big need that we forget that it only takes 3 minutes to take one step.
Yeah. Well, and when I think about this, again, some people might go, well, I don't fly every day like Bob Goff does. Well, do you go to a restaurant more than once ever? Do you sit in the same place when you go to certain places? Do you go to the same gym on a regular basis?
Same Starbucks barista.
Yeah. Are you loving those people 3 minutes at a time, or are you just getting in and getting out, doing your thing, putting your earbuds in, keeping your head down? And
That's the international signal for leave me alone.
Yeah.
It's putting the earbuds in.
When the reality is we should be taking them out and saying, I want to know what's going on in your life. Because one of the things in both of Bob Goff's book, in the very back, is his phone number. His personal phone number. And you can call him and he will answer the phone.
Oh, there it is right there.
He will answer the phone. And can you even imagine? These are bestsellers on the New York Times bestseller list. How many phone calls do you think he gets? He gets multiple phone calls from prisons that cost him money every time he accepts it.
Do you remember the chapter that he wrote of the guy that he ended up buying an ankle bracelet for because he called him?
And then he never seen him again.
He never saw him again, but love doesn't have to get something out of it.
No, absolutely not. And when you take the time to love, it makes an impact so much greater than yourself. He talks about another point about, I don't actually know if I wrote it down. Oh yeah, I did. I'm going to give you a fourth one. Sorry.
It's all good.
What we do with our love will become the conversations we have with God. It's not about the things that, places that we messed up. It's about, what did you do with your life?
Yeah.
What did you do? And he was saying that when he goes to heaven, he's like, I got all these goofy questions, but I get to talk about all the things that, all these things where I've loved people, and I get to have these conversations and hopefully hear about the outcomes that I don't know about.
Yeah. That really is a good point. When we got a lawnmower that's right by the door. Wow. We picked a great time to do the video.
Just ignore that.
But I guess one of the great filtering questions of our life could be if the conversations you have with God are whittled down to the conversations, to the times that you loved other people, how long will your conversation with God be?
That's good.
I'm nervous that my conversation with God's going to be really short.
Yeah.
Because sometimes my life becomes so self-focused, and I don't focus as much on how well I am loving other people.
Yeah.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't want my son or my daughters to grow up to be busy people. I want them to grow up to be loving people.
Yeah. Well, and to add on to that, it's really important for us to recognize that what you're saying is not to make you feel guilty that you're not doing something, or that my conversations will be short. That's not a guilt trip. It's not about that. It's about realizing that it's not about looking like a better version of ourselves. It's about looking more like Jesus.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that Jesus' sacrifice freed us to do these things and freed us to live like him. We're not subject and bound by the guilt of our mistakes and the places where we fall short. We're free to become more like Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's something that a takeaway could be, well, I feel really guilty that I'm not doing these things. Don't feel guilty. Feel empowered to follow Jesus and become more like Jesus.
Yeah, I think that's a really good line right there. So we've been touching on it all throughout this video, but this series really is all about connecting parents with resources that can help them parent their students better or more effectively. So what are some ways that this book can help our parents of teenagers?
I think that this book, the best way that this helps a parent is it can help invigorate them to see what they can do and see what it looks like from somebody who is, I don't know how old. He's older gentleman, Bob Goff. What is he, probably in his 60s?
He's probably in his 60s, I would guess.
And he's still running the race well. He talks about mistakes that he's made, but he also talks about how his kids have grown up seeing these things, and his kids are replicating these things.
Yeah.
So to me, like, what this does for me as a parent is it excites me, and it helps me to see what it looks like for someone to really love people and the impact that that has on their kids. And it, again, has reminded me of my father-in-law, who is a direct person that I can look at and talk to and see how he is following Jesus well and leading his family well.
I think that's the perfect thought for this. If you're looking for a book that will inspire you to love better and to love your kids better and to show your kids how to love the world better, no matter if they are difficult people or they're easy people to love, that really is the best word for it. Invigorates your faith, invigorates your love. It's inspiring.
Yeah, and it's because he's living out what the Bible says. Not what he wants to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for this book club parent edition. Again, the book is Everybody Always by Bob Goff. We're going to give away a copy, and that copy is going to be given away to Christian Johnson. Thank you so much, Christian, for letting us know your vote. We will have another poll up soon for you guys to decide which book you want to have us read and review for you guys. As always, we love you. If you have any questions for us, feel free to put them in the comments below. We would love to connect with you guys a little bit better. We hope you have a wonderful day. And until next time, I'm Kyle.
I'm Dakota.
And we will see you guys later. Thanks.